Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm Alex. Information is valuable, isn't it? Knowledge is power, all of that. Which is why I read everything that I can, even from sources where the majority of the material I find to be questionable. So I'm on the UNS Review, which is an alternative media selection, a collection of interesting, important, and controversial perspectives largely excluded from the American mainstream media. And I am on an article by Eric Margolis, who I don't know who that is, but he is a columnist for this website, and apparently he is Canadian. And the title of this article is Just How Safe Are US-Made Drugs? And I'm just going to go through it, read it through, full attribution for the content to the author, commentary my own, ergo, it is within the parameters of fair use. Now, leading paragraph. I was very interested to see Senator Bernie Sanders take a group of American diabetics from Detroit to Windsor, Ontario to buy insulin. I used to own a pharmaceutical company in Windsor. In Canada, the life-saving medication insulin, which was invented in Toronto by doctors Banting and Best, costs a tenth of what it does in the USA. That's very interesting. I didn't know it was invented in Canada, but I've actually had a recent run-in with insulin. I work for UPS, I work in the hub, but at times I go to driver help for the extra cash. So what they do with the insulin, as far as I understood, was they put freezer packs in it to keep it cool, and then we deliver it to the folks. Now here in the southeast where I live, it gets really, really hot. So sometimes the stuff starts to melt and it gets damaged. And as we delivered to this one gentleman who was standing in his garage with his friend, he made sure to evaluate the package as we were there because it had been damaged so many times. So that there is really wonky stuff, not only with the quality, as you're going to see in this article, of drugs in this country, but with the delivery systems by which people get them. Okay? And it's just a crazy, crazy world out there. So let's keep going. Many Americans who can't afford the ever-rising costs of their must-have drugs are flocking to Canada to buy them. Drug prices in Canada and Europe are strictly controlled by governments. Unfortunately, Canadian companies are allowed to pirate American and international medical patents and products. That's a big reason why they are so inexpensive. So, you see, we have a catch-22 going on here. In order to make it profitable and attractive for companies and scientists and folks who all still have to eat and, like the rest of us, like fancy things, you have to create an incentive. And the country that has the incentive appears to be the United States. So that's why, as far as I've understood it, a lot of medical innovation comes from the United States. However, the quality of drugs, due to our highly competitive capitalist free-for-all, is, not that great, because we try to do away with bureaucracy in favor of business. And I can understand that to some extent, but you need to have significant oversight with something like drugs. And as per this article, we'll see that in the United States, unfortunately, despite its innovative advantages, the quality advantages are not there. Let's continue. Now, consumers don't give a hoot about the profits of Big Pharma or who pays the vast sums for research and development. They clamor for more low-cost alternatives. The Democrats are making a major issue out of drug pricing, calling low-priced drugs a human right. But then why isn't food also a human right? That's a very good point. We're not expected to be handed food. This is the thing about rights. Rights are things that allow you to acquire resources. Resources are not rights, as far as I understand it. That is my commentary on the subject, but I can also see why some people might disagree. I definitely feel the brunt, feel the impact of, hey, food prices kind of seem to be going up as far as I can tell. And that's one of the reasons I'm researching water, but that's a tangent. Anyway, Americans are angry at high drug prices, particularly oldsters who vote for President Trump, like one of my family members. Frightened by this prospect, Trump just proclaimed he would henceforth allow Americans to import prescription drugs from Canada. Actually, this has been going on by mail order for a long time, but now we see the prospects of endless busloads of elderly Americans trekking up to Montreal, Toronto, Windsor, and Vancouver to buy up Canadian supplies of drugs. So, kind of like with the water thing that I've been researching, people will come to a source or will draw from a source that's not their own, thereby impoverishing the supply for the native population. Like when a bottling company comes and takes water from a reservoir that belongs to a certain area, they're depleting a resource at the expense of the native population, and that creates all sorts of strife. So this is why we live in a weird kind of, pardon my French, but clusterfucky globalization craziness world. Okay, I am a believer in George Washington's non-interventionist ideals of, hey, stay the hell out of foreign entanglements. But that foreign entanglements occur even outside of military stuff. They just come to your doorstep, especially in a world like our own. And while we shouldn't seek out foreign entanglements, we should certainly become aware of them and the global nature of how the world functions. Anyway, Canadian pharmacists are worried that their always thin supplies will be exhausted by the U.S., which has 10 times more consumers than Canada. Because the U.S. is better, I'm just saying. You know, Canada's kind of cold. The potent U.S. pharma industry is already fighting back, insinuating that the quality control of Canadian drugs is not reliable and that Canadian-made products could be dangerous. So the U.S.'s business interests, pharmaceutical business interests, like, oh, well, your Canadian drugs are dangerous because your quality control is crap. Well, this fellow from Canada, who apparently had invested in some firm up in Windsor, says, nonsense! In my firm, we would routinely sample U.S.-made products, particularly nutritionals, which is what I'm fond of. Buy all that Joe Rogan-esque stuff, the gut flora support, etc. Our QC reported that over 70% of the U.S.-made products we tested failed our strict in-house quality control standards for label claims, content, potency, shelf life, and purity. Personally, I avoided many U.S.-made products where a Canadian alternative was available. If I had to take a made-in-USA product, I would stick to those made by Big Pharma, avoiding ones from small firms and some store private label brands. And that sort of makes sense, but this is why, as I said at the beginning, information is important. Knowledge is power, and that's why I'm doing this, because, hey, I found this, and now I am repeating it, and that is a service, because I've had to digest information and bring it to y'all. And that's not just to say, oh my gosh, I'm doing something. I'm saying we should all be involved in this process of informing each other, because that's the way we're going to solve these weird interconnected problems that face us. Anyhow, but there is worse news about USA-made products. See, this is the downfall, and it's not capitalism, because capitalism can have regulation within it. In fact, I would argue that in order for capitalism to function properly, it requires regulation. Otherwise, it's anarchy and not a system. Capitalism is a system. So every system, every game requires a set of rules. So this whole argument of regulation is like vaguely communistic is just nonsense. So listen here. When your absolute most high pinnacle is a profit margin, you're going to buy cheap stuff and you're going to sell it at a markup, which is basically what's going on right now. Many of the raw materials used by U.S. pharma originate from China or India. Both nations are known for poor quality control, adulteration, contamination, and mislabeling in drugs and food. I sent our QC people to both India and China to evaluate raw materials. They came back with hair-raising stories of filthy conditions, poor records, and contamination. Machines were too often not cleaned between different product batches. Raw materials are sometimes stored outdoors and infested by insects or rats. I don't disbelieve that. Life is hard in China, It's dirty. People are overworked. Why wouldn't that happen? Same goes for India. It's overpopulated, overcrowded, people are overworked and underpaid. Why would their conditions be good? They're basically just trying to survive in a lot of cases. And that's not to say that China and India haven't done great things and are not great nations. They just face a lot more challenges than the developed countries do. Okay? So, India and Chinese manufacturing practices are slowly improving. And they're trying, you see? Yet at the same time, Western suppliers of raw materials are relentlessly being driven out of business by ruthless price cutting by Asian suppliers. This is how, for example, China came to dominate the vitamin C market, undercutting reputable suppliers from Europe and the United States. U.S. drug chains have cooperated in this process by always selecting the lowest cost products to make higher margins. There we go. Price cutting, and then people within the United States as patriotic American businesses benefiting from price cutting by selling stuff at a markup. I don't know if Jeff Bezos did that on purpose with his business model, but I have a friend who does Amazon stuff, and basically what he does is he finds things and he sells them at a markup via Amazon using their ready-made algorithm to help him in that process. So, that's why when I hear about all this entrepreneurial talk and how this new generation, Gen Z, is just so go-getting and you're not creating a new product, you're not creating value, you're being a weasel. That's what you're doing. This is not sustainable. And the people that get caught up with this aren't necessarily bad. They just haven't thought through of what they're doing because our society values, oh, well, are you making money? Not are you bringing value? And that is the goddamn fucking problem, isn't it? Pardon my French, ladies and gentlemen. Now, for example, the important anti-diabetic drug metformin is now primarily sourced in India. No matter that it is labeled made in USA. Now that is some tourism right there. So we end up with USA prices but Indian quality control. India remains the world's biggest adulterator of food products. Small wonder Indian and Chinese consumers prefer foreign-made products, so the people that live in India and China were wise to the shenanigans, buy their stuff from elsewhere if they can afford it. Oh my. Yeah, back in the day, Greek consumers would not buy pharma products made in Greece for the same reason. Opa! One major source of this problem is so-called deregulation. Yeah, you think? Getting rid of tiresome government regulation always sounds like a good idea. It's a Republican mantra. Tell me about it. I had a lady years back. She took me out to dinner after church, and I was like, oh, that's so nice. And then she started doing the classic church lady thing and said, hey, what are you doing with your life? And I said, well, I'm writing a book about the research of water. And she said, oh my God, you don't want to have those. She didn't say it directly, but there was a lot of insinuation, busybodies that have a self-interest in the hidden agenda, and government regulation is always bad. And I'm like, I didn't even really start talking about like government regulation, but you need to have rules in place, otherwise people are going to cut corners. So a farmer has an interest in offloading manure because his cattle produce a lot of manure, but you can't offload manure over, I think it's called a karst, which is a permeable layer of rock, and have the manure get into the groundwater and then give E. coli to freaking children in the neighboring townships. That's why you need certain levels of regulation. Government always messes things up. Yes, the government are made up of people who make mistakes. Just because people make mistakes doesn't mean we don't have a police force. Assholes. Like, this is basic shit to me. I don't know why it's difficult for some people. Let's continue. Getting rid of tiresome government regulation always sounds like a good idea. It's a Republican mantra. I used to believe in it too, but deregulation has led the U.S. to make important cuts to pharma quality control, notably in raw materials. Companies are left to police themselves, which always works out so well historically. The result has been the steady decline of raw material quality and an explosion of exaggerated or just plain fake label claims like what was mentioned up there, where stuff is made in India but is labeled as being made in the USA. Okay? Health supplements are a notorious example of wide-scale fraud. Canadian-made drugs and supplements are often better quality and products from the US, but they too often suffer from substandard ingredients and lack of policing. The answer to this problem may be for the US to join the rest of the civilized world by imposing price controls on drugs. But there is a catch to this, as with everything. Doing so is distasteful and will hurt research and development. But there seems no better answer. The world is hard, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why I'm very glad to have people like Mr. Margolis informing us of things. Whether you agree or disagree with him politically, maybe since I use this article, I want to point y'all his way and see if he's got some kind of options. I think I see a Patreon or something that might just be for the interview, but if you like this article that I read from him, send him some, either words of support or monetary support. And if you like my commentary, subscribe to this channel. Visit my website, www.fragmentjournal.com, where you'll find stories, ideas, and more published fairly regularly. I try to really do my best. I've been doing really good these past few weeks with publishing a story as a series. And take care, everybody. That is all. Cheers.